Hello everyone, welcome and thank you for coming back to Listening In, the National Counselling and Psychotherapy Society podcast. In this series, we want to give you the opportunity to listen in to some of the conversations that we are lucky enough to have every day. That is, with a variety of people and organisations all working in the field of mental health and well-being. Today, we're delighted to bring you a conversation with Lana Foster, Managing Director of Bright World Guardianships. Recorded back in February, Lana describes a little about how she got into such a niche line of work and how 25 years ago, working in the education sector led her to establishing her own business with Bright World. The purpose of Lana's work, and that of all her team, is to ensure that international students who come here to study in the UK are supported appropriately and adequately, especially with their mental and emotional health and well-being. Through Bright World's network of host families, care managers, local coordinators and transport services, every step of a child's time at boarding school or university is supported by adults, all of whom have been DBS checked and trained, even the taxi drivers. And notably, in response to a growing number of young people showing signs of mental health challenges, Lana engaged the help of Kate Day, NCPS Child Ambassador and Trainer, and together they created a bespoke mental health training programme for some of Bright World's staff and host families. We can only imagine what difficulties a child or young person may experience living and studying so far away from home and family. So here's Lana to help us understand more. Lana, how did you end up doing this? Because you established 2000 Bright World, didn't you? It's your silver anniversary this year.
Yeah, so 25 years ago, I sort of branched out on my own. I had worked previously at an international college, so I'd been involved with international students for sort of 10, 15 years prior to that, and started out on my own to start a business where I invite international students. I help them to gain places into boarding schools in the UK, and then I'm their guardian when they get here.
So is that, so if you worked at international colleges beforehand, was it doing a similar type of work, or was it doing something very different but in that environment?
Yes, that environment and more marketing of British education. So I'd been used to counselling parents on obtaining a place at a school and doing your A levels and GCSEs or O levels, GCSEs while they were here. But then I became aware of the fact that boarding schools were slightly different from the international college I worked at, in that they closed during holiday times and half terms. They weren't international schools, they were British schools, and international students had to fit in with their ways more. So the exeat weekends when they close and the house parents have a break, and the half-term holidays where the schools close, is where a guardian would step in and take over on those times.
And that was something, has that always been the case? I don't know a lot about the history of this type of work. So is this a relatively new thing, guardianships, or?
Thankfully, it's becoming more looked upon as an important thing to get right. I think in the old days, or certainly when I started, schools didn't insist that you had a proper guardian or anything. I think although they still closed at exeats and half terms, I think lots of students just sort of went home to friends at school there, or goodness knows what they did. So there weren't that many of us of guardianship companies then.
Mm.
So I always thought at least the few that I have are going somewhere relatively safe, and where are all the others going?
So the schools had sort of made a sort of assumption, yeah, an assumption that I don't know if I'm being too harsh, but it wasn't their problem. Here we are, we're providing education, we're providing care. I'm talking about back then, back in inverted commas, old days. And then when it was the holidays or the weekends that they weren't open, whatever times that was that the young people weren't in their care, it was really, they just assumed that that was being taken care of by parents or friends.
Yeah,
I
that the
see.
overseas parent would be sorting it out,
Mm.
and have a family friend here or a contact here, and or that the student would ask around at school, I think, and see if they could go home with somebody for the holiday. So I don't know. I suppose there weren't as many international students here then, and but certainly nowadays, luckily, although there's still no regulation at all in our sector, if you can believe
Ah,
that,
okay.
there's no government legislation. Anyone can be a guardian still, which is really incredible to think of. Looking after children in the holidays, who
Yeah.
are probably the most vulnerable of all. They're not speaking in their first language, and they don't know our customs and ways. But there are now at least safeguarding standards around guardianship that are led by Aegis, our accrediting body.
I see.
So there is an organisation, a charity called Aegis,
Hmm.
that set a framework of standards for guardianship companies. But I mean, you don't have to join Aegis, be a member of them, and be inspected. That's a choice
Yeah.
of an organisation.
I understand. I mean, actually, not dissimilar to the counselling and psychotherapy profession, which obviously I'm much more familiar with. And, many people will assume that there's statutory regulation for that, and there actually isn't. And so it falls upon, I'm assuming a similar sort of premise of what you're describing for your work. And that is sort of voluntary regulation to a certain degree, and a setting of standards that people follow, but you don't have to follow. And again, when we're talking children and young people, and this will be a shared experience that we both have, understanding safeguarding, understanding, like you say, the vulnerabilities of all children, young people, never mind those that have come from another country and are living in this country, is vital. And I know we'll come on and talk about that in a little bit, I'm sure, in a bit more detail. But yeah, it's interesting to hear that there's nothing legally existing or required in that area. And so what made you, if it's okay to ask, take that step and set out on your own after your work at the international schools?
Well, I was ambitious and I wanted to run my own business.
Yeah.
So I'd sort of reached a glass ceiling, I think they call it, where I was. So I obviously thought I was a lot better than they thought I was. So I thought, right, I'll go out and start my own business and try and attract, the students myself to become an agency and place myself into boarding schools. And the sort of guardianship side, I knew sort of went hand in hand with that.
Hmm.
And in those days, overseas agents similarly didn't really know very much about boarding schools. So I was a valuable person to them, agents overseas who had customers who wanted to place their children in boarding schools, but they had no idea where to send them.
Mm.
So it was a good sort of business model in those days of helping agents to place students into boarding schools, not necessarily dealing directly with the parents themselves until I was then guardian.
I
And then
see.
yeah. So that's really what I did. And yeah, it was ambition.
I love that. What a refreshing, straightforward, honest answer. I think that's absolutely brilliant. Yeah, that's really good to hear. And knowing where you are now, it shows that was some personal confidence and insight and awareness you had of yourself, which is again really refreshing to hear. If it's not a very stupid question, Lana, I'm going to ask you on behalf of myself as well as all the people that are going to be listening to this, what is a guardian, and what are guardianship services, specifically in the context in which we're talking?
Yes, I mean, what it isn't is a legal guardian. So a
Okay.
legal guardian replaces a parent
Yeah.
and is appointed in a court of law. A guardian it's a term that's been adopted over the years by the boarding schools, for want of a better term, to describe a responsible adult,
Okay.
or a company who will take responsibility for international children while they're studying at a boarding school or a university in the UK, and their parents are not resident here.
Mm-hmm.
So we're in loco parentis to a certain extent. And although the school also maintains a duty of care as their visa sponsor, we come in when these schools are closed predominantly, and take over the care of the child so that there's a seamless care. So the terminology is a guardian, an education guardian is another term that's used.
Yeah.
And it can be a person, a responsible adult, or it can be a guardianship organisation like Bright World.
I see. So you are their official guardian, and you then use families, is that right? Or again, individuals who then do that hosting and that caring for the young child?
Yes, I mean when we get to the size that we are, so there are some guardians that are just one person and they might host the student as well.
I see.
And that's it. So they do everything. They might pick them up from the airport and they might host them, and then they're there in an emergency for them. They do everything. But most parents don't have a person like that, most overseas parents. So they choose a guardianship organisation, which I definitely would recommend they do, that's Aegis accredited, not just some person that's saying they're a guardian and will pick their child up at the airport. I mean, it beggars belief, really, doesn't it, that could happen with nobody checking out who these people are. But so that's what we do. And because we're a larger company, obviously I can't do everything anymore. I did at the beginning. I mean, I've never hosted students, but I did used to do most of the work around guardianship. But now we have a full head office team here of 15 people who, we have a travel department and a host family safeguarding and recruitment department, and a host family and care, a guardianship care department. So there are lots of layers of care, of people doing lots of work around guardianship. And then, of course, we have our network of host families and a network of drivers who pick children up from the airport. So all of these people come under the umbrella of Bright World.
I see. So, and you are not only checking, it's really interesting hearing you talking about, even drivers within this whole network of, I suppose it's sort of wrap around support for a child on behalf of their parents who obviously are living outside of the UK. And you are checking, and would I be right in thinking also looking out for, supporting in your own right, the families and the drivers, almost to ensure that the children are receiving the best care and support they can? So everybody's being checked, everybody's being looked after, because actually it will be the child that benefits from that.
Anyone who comes into contact with the child is screened by us and has to follow a code of conduct, Because, you know, amazingly, although a driver might seem to be a very nice person, they make really silly decisions, like dropping a child off at an airport who's only 14 and leaving them outside and letting them go in on their own and checking them in. It's small things like that that can make a journey for a child very scary and uncomfortable. And so we have very strict rules with our drivers that they know that they have to take the child, they have to park, pay the parking, we'll pay that, and then take the child in, make sure they know where to check in, so that all of the experiences that the child has are positive. There's nothing worse, is there, than even as an adult, if you've got a transfer booked and you arrive at the airport in an unknown place and there's no one there to meet you, you start worrying.
Yeah, of course.
Particularly if you're travelling on your own, or if you're a child travelling on your own, and you've been told that there will be a driver waiting for you when you come through arrivals, you want them to be there, or it can be very stressful.
Of course. And I'm just wondering, on the other side as well, we know, I'm a parent myself. I know what you've just mentioned, like a 14-year-old, how persuasive they can be sometimes too, how young people themselves can say, oh, you can drop me here, it's fine, because they don't want to be dropped off at all of a sudden they're this big independent person in their own right, or so they see it. And so is I don't know if anything in that sort of sense goes on, but just ensuring that, again, somebody like a driver, is holding those boundaries and is insisting, no, I have to absolutely make sure that you get checked in and I'm going to see you through.
Driver might ring us and say, look, this child's saying they don't want me to take them in.
Oh, so it does happen?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, the child will say, oh, my mum and dad say I can go to London and stay overnight in a hotel. Oh, right. Okay. And actually, sometimes their parents are saying that.
Oh, gosh. Okay.
Because I don't know if they sort of realise what that really means, and their child will persuade the parent, I'll be fine, mum and dad. But so that we have those battles as well with parents and children. Well, you're under our guardianship now, so you can't.
Yeah.
It's not safe, etc., etc. So that a lot of that happens. Yeah.
So it's quite complex. There are negotiations to be had, and there's it's bringing lots of people in, isn't it, to this child's care and who has any rights or decisions to make at any given time. It must be very sensitive, sort of delicate work at times, Lana, I imagine.
Yes, it is. But above all, we have to always put the child at the centre of everything.
Yeah.
And not care who we're upsetting or offending perhaps in any way on the way there, as long as the child's safe. That's the most important thing.
Yeah. And actually, I haven't asked you, one of the most basic questions, and that is, we're talking about child, we're talking about young people. Is there an age specification for this? Is it very young, or?
We don't normally take any students onto our guardianship program who are under 10 years old.
I see.
We are asked.
Okay.
But we struggle with the just being so very young, and having to put them in a host family. I have issues around that.
Okay.
So usually for 10-year-olds plus, that seems to be an age where, yes, they might get homesick and yes, they might struggle a bit, but we can work with that. But they're not still so young that they think it's appropriate and they want to get into bed with the host family and cuddle them, because that's what they would do with their mum and dad. I mean, that's a really sort of almost still a baby.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's right, fair on anybody, and certainly not the child. So our advice to parents who are sending their children at that age is they may be able to cope at school and in the boarding environment, but can you come and look after them yourself during the half-term holiday, or have them come home to you just until they're a bit more settled?
Yeah. 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 It does make you. I'm thinking of. Yeah, I mean, children of any age, young children, teenagers again, actually, that we know can be particularly vulnerable, regardless how they come across sometimes. Um, and and we know if I'm just sort of thinking of, I suppose, again, where our work crosses over, and that is the care, the safeguarding of children and the mental health of children. And I'm just wondering, I imagine that perhaps children at boarding school may, and I know this isn't all children at all, but may experience, certain challenges, certain difficulties as a result of their time away from family and away from their home environment or their home country. But I'm thinking particularly in terms of international students, whether what your experiences of specific challenges that they may face being so far away from home at times. Are there sort of common challenges, common problems that you're hearing about?
Yes, there are. I mean, one thing immediately that springs to mind is the fact that they are from overseas. This is costing a lot of money.
Yeah.
They're here to succeed, and the pressure that they feel academically, even if their parents aren't knowingly putting them under that pressure, but they feel that pressure to succeed because their parents they know how much they're spending and investing in their education. And that can actually cause a lot of mental health issues, particularly around exam times. If they're struggling with their English and they don't feel that they're progressing as fast as they should be, that can cause lots of problems. And of course, then homesickness is another classic that it doesn't really matter how old you are, you can suffer from homesickness. And so it doesn't matter what stage they're coming at, even if they're 16, they're coming for their A levels, they can still have this feel terrible homesickness, which can again put a lot of pressure on them and make their life pretty unhappy.
And again, I know we can all perhaps remember back to our own childhoods, or if we have children of our own, think of their experiences. And I remember being homesick, having sleepovers down the road in the same town with my friends, perhaps when I was younger. And so to imagine that distance, that some of those, just how far away some of these young people are that you look after, I can only imagine what that must be like. Because then again, it's not just people that they're missing and home in terms of their own family, but it is again it's culture, isn't it? It's food, it's everything.
Yes, I mean, often as well, students are sent to the UK to fix a problem.
What do you mean by that, Lana?
They may have been struggling perhaps with their mental health back home, we discover, and a solution that their parents believe to be a solution is to send them to the UK to a boarding school.
Oh, I
and
see.
then that might then fix the issue, which of course it doesn't, and that can then rematerialize when they're here. And it's only at that point that we realize that they've struggled for a while back home as well. And often parents, even if they're not sending them to fix it, they don't tell us that they've struggled with their mental health at home because they don't think we will take it very well, or we might not accept them as guardianship students if we know that they have mental health issues already, which obviously is not the case. But so sometimes we unravel these issues more once they're here.
After the event. Oh, I see. That's so interesting. So they feel if they disclose it, it might be putting their application at risk. And I suppose we need to take into context too that, in some cultures, some societies, some families, just talking about mental health in of itself is just not, just not what they do, or just not what they're familiar or comfortable with. I understand that, but that must be so difficult for you then, that you're presented with these particularly vulnerable young people who have been vulnerable anyway and struggling anyway, and then, as you say, they're living in this foreign environment to them. And of course, we would all understand, far from that making them feel any better, or, as you put it, sort of fixing it, it actually just exacerbates the situation for them. How again, I really appreciate, this might sound like a really stupid question, this is something you're so familiar with, but how do you learn about those challenges? Who will that child inform or tell? Or is it that the school notice it comes out in behaviour, and that then feeds down to you? How do those processes work, Lana, where you then have that knowledge and understanding that a child is finding things difficult?
We come across it in various ways. Occasionally, we will be told by the school suddenly that a student is of low mood, or worse, has disclosed that they, at the very worst, have suicidal ideation.
Yeah.
And so we're contacted by the school at that point, and that may be that's the first time we've heard that there's any problems. Or it might be that the host family has noticed that this time when they go to stay with them, they've changed and they're not as they used to be when they've stayed there. And they will report that to us, that they're concerned about them. So sometimes it's us that notices it.
So actually, that's really interesting, because, and maybe something I should have asked about earlier, for the most part, our students will have a host family then, or person, responsible adult, as you call it, whoever that is, whose care they will be under. And that person will be the same person throughout their education as far as possible. I suppose I'm asking about continuity of care, because just you saying about they will then notice, or this child, there are differences in this child, I'm showing concern. That's something that can come, really good thing that comes from continuity of care, doesn't it? That there's that history and that familiarity with them.
Well, I mean, another layer of our company that I haven't mentioned is our local coordinators, or Bright World Buddy system. So we have a person that lives near the school that visits the child. So from Bright World, that's continuous care, and often they notice, or they might feel comfortable enough to talk to them about some struggles they're having. With host families, as much as possible, we do place them, as long as they want to and everyone's happy, that they stay with the same family every time.
I see.
Because that does give them a continuity of care. Yeah. It doesn't always work like that, and actually some students never have a host family, because they do go home for their holidays, and it's actually only when we're asked to place them in a family for a short period of time that they even have a host family.
I see. Okay. Yeah, so that distinction needs to be clear, that sometimes it's not always with a host family, but in that case, you will be that again, guardian, that person of responsibility for them during term time. If something is needed, somebody needs to be on hand for them. So then what happens, Lana? So you've got the young person, either the school have expressed concern, one of your local, was it buddies you said, that's there for the child, may have cause for concern, or perhaps any family or other person that's involved. Again, is there then a process? What happens?
Well, the whole issue of mental health issues is obviously, it's really serious, isn't it? I mean,
Of course.
it's not just a student needing to leave school because they've been caught vaping in the corridor or something. I mean, that's serious, but it's not life-threatening, really worrying.
Yeah.
So more and more in the last few years, we have, I don't know why, it's been on the increase. People say it's since COVID that children have struggled more with their mental health. I don't know whether now it's more spoken about, that they can actually voice their feelings more than they used to be able to. I don't remember when I started the business in 2000 ever having to worry about mental health issues with children. So I had fewer students then, I guess, and it wasn't so spoken about. So I think it's good that they can express these feelings. But more and more it was happening. And so I felt very underqualified, frankly, to help them properly. And when a school was asking me to remove a child into my care, I felt uncomfortable about it because I wasn't sure it was the right thing for the child and whether or how I should handle it. I had no training.
Sorry, you say remove a child. You mean because the school feels that this particular child, for example, is at risk or struggling so much that they can't continue to study, and then they just sort of say, "Here we go. It's in sort of short. This is your problem. You now take care of them."
Yes, and I think because schools don't have a parent.
Yeah.
So if you had a child at a school and the school called you and said that they feel very low mood and they're feeling suicidal, they've had suicidal thoughts. I mean, you would move heaven and earth and get there, wouldn't you?
Of course.
I mean, there would be no question that you would need anybody else to go there. You would go there, and the school would expect you to go there, and they would then not really have to worry about what happened after that because you would be in charge.
Yeah.
It's very different when you've got a child that's from thousands of miles away who says that. And I think the misunderstanding with a lot of people that work in boarding schools is that a guardian is just like that parent. So they should just call them and say, "Can you come and get them?"
I see.
Because they're not safe here.
But you're not the parent, and like you say, those first experiences you had of that, you just realised. And actually, it's actually again really refreshing to hear somebody say, "I don't know what to do with this. This is a problem that's been handed to me that of extreme severity, and I don't know what to do or where to take it or whatever."
I just knew that I had to sort of do something to
Yeah.
explain to that member of staff and have the confidence and have my staff have the confidence to say to that member of staff, this isn't right for the child, and this is why, but this is how we're going to handle it. So that's when I involved Kate Day of KRD Training. I reached out to her because I was recommended to her that as somebody who, I mean, I know she's a fellow of the NCPS, and she's a child ambassador and chair for you.
That's right. Yeah.
So more knowledge we could never have hoped for. And also somebody who really listened to me and understood my issues and has been incredibly helpful because she's really formed she's really helped me to formulate this mental health champion initiative that we called it 3 years ago, where we faced this question head on as an organisation, because I didn't want to be a guardianship company that just told a school, no, we don't do that.
Yeah, well done you, Lana. Yeah.
Because actually, even before I knew what I was doing was correct and how to do it, and the processes that Kate's helped us to formulate, which we now follow by the letter. I had removed a couple of students into host families for a period of rest and relaxation, for want of a better word,
Yeah.
to get them out of school, because the issue was in school. There was some conflicts going on there with peer groups. And I saw how this boy was transformed after a couple of weeks in a host family. And the host family, the sort of stars aligned with that one, because the host family had training in mental health.
Oh, I see.
And he went there. They were available. He went there. The school were amazing, and they liaised with us and gave us loads of support. So they didn't just throw him out, and they kept with us. And he managed to sort of speak to the family and get him his into his own headspace, and they dealt with things back at school. And he went back to school after a couple of weeks, and he finished his A levels, which he probably wouldn't have done if we hadn't have intervened and been able to support him like that. So I really wanted to do it, because I thought, if done properly and with the child at the centre of everything each time, we really can help. And what a great thing we can do. And it also made me realise that there are some host families who are really up for it. They want to help too. And so that's when the mental health initiative sort of began.
I see. I want to come back and ask you exactly what that involved in a second, but there's something you said a little earlier that I was going to ask you about anyway, actually. And it sounds like, from what you're saying, many of these changes you've put in place have come as a result of COVID. And I was going to ask, as a mum of a son at the time who went to university. His first year at university was in COVID. And, obviously I'm just sort of down the road, as it were. I'm available and I'm here and I'm in the same country for whatever that might have brought up for him. Again, I can only imagine what that must have been like for international students, the stress of it all. So I just wonder if it's okay, just briefly touch in and just ask, what must that have been like for all concerned at that time? Are you able to even give us a snapshot of what that meant for you, for work, and for the young people in question?
For most of the young people, in terms of being here, because all the schools closed, I think it was the 20th of March. I
know. I never remember.
And so all of the students had to go home, back to parents, and the flights were still going. And so that was absolute madness, because we suddenly had all these flights. We had to cancel all the host families we'd got lined up for whatever reason, and all the flights, and get them all to the airport, get them all on flights. I don't think there was even testing at that time. They just all went, and 60 got stranded.
Oh, that's what I wondered.
And they never could get back. 60 students were with us for months and months and months. So that's when I suppose I realised that if anyone had questioned, I don't need a guardian, they did then, because the schools were closed. They went. And so they were with host families all that time.
I can't imagine how difficult that must have been for them as well, to be a young but and have that set. Because none of us knew, did we? None of us knew, when is this ending? What does this mean? And to imagine they're fearful perhaps for themselves, for their families in their home countries. I mean, the mind boggles.
The mind boggles. I mean, it all seemed to be going. It all seemed to go quite well. I mean, they all stayed with their families. They all told us stories of her having lovely times, and
Oh, well,
they were.
that's
I mean,
good.
they were really well looked after. But yeah, all those worries that we were all having then.
Mm,
I haven't got any statistics on whether the students that were stranded have struggled more than students who weren't. I don't know.
yeah.
It all then became so complicated because we never knew when they were going to be able to get back. There was then testing and, what if you tested and you had COVID and, it was really awful. But we got through it and they all came back in the September, back to
Mm,
school by the
mm,
September.
mm.
And then there was a second lockdown, wasn't there? It all happened again. So, yeah, it must have caused a lot of homesickness, worry to the student, which
Yeah.
is obviously why more of them seem to be having issues now.
Do you feel? I know it's difficult to say, specifically, but do you have that sense that perhaps sort of mobilized that sense clearly that you already had about mental health and the children's mental health, and having this training and these processes put in place, which again we'll come on to in a second. But do you feel that did just make that happen a little bit more quickly, or seem just a little bit more imperative to do after COVID?
It did because it was. So one thing that was really horrible during COVID for us was being asked by a school to remove a student because they had COVID.
Gosh.
Now, I understand why they wanted to remove the student because they didn't want all the other students to catch it.
Mm.
But similarly, try asking, at the beginning of COVID, try asking a host family to take a student who had COVID.
Yeah.
Got no chance.
Yeah.
So for me, that was a very horrible time because a lot of the schools didn't understand my problem. I wasn't trying to not do it.
Mm.
I couldn't because families wouldn't take students with COVID. It was a very unknown thing. I mean, eventually, after a couple of years, when we had the vaccination and everything like that, and nowadays, I mean, if I rang up a family now and said the students got COVID, they wouldn't mind. They would just take them in
Mm.
because we're not so scared of it now, are we? But at that early time, no one knew anything. So when mental health issues happen, it's a similar conversation you're having with a school. Remove the student because you're responsible for them now and we can't keep them safe here in school. We
Yeah.
don't want them here in school. And it's the same sort of argument that you have. So when the mental health stuff started to rear its head more, I thought, I'm not going down this route again, because I had some fairly nasty arguments with schools during COVID about this subject. And it really takes it out of you,
Mm. Mm.
trying to justify what you're saying and being told that you aren't doing your job properly is very, very difficult to take when you're someone as conscientious as I am.
Oh, yeah.
And I had the same feelings when I was being asked by schools to remove students with mental health issues. I thought, I'm not doing this, so I'm going to do this properly
Mm.
and
That's
find out why I'm saying no so that I can be more confident in my messaging.
that's really interesting. So that intuitively that you're doing the right thing, but you just needed that information backing you up, reinforcing your argument so that you could then state that more clearly and more firmly. And I suppose to some degree have then these processes that you can put in place to then offer something different, which again is where then Kate, so again, as you said earlier, for listeners, particularly those that are familiar with the society, Kate is our child ambassador, and well experienced in children, young people's mental health, and that's obviously who you engage to help you do that. So coming on to that in a very practical sense, what happened? I know you've got, is it mental health initiative? There's champions in my head somewhere. Where do I get?
Champion initiative.
I see.
So it was this project I was embarking on.
Mm-hmm.
And then with a view to having a number of mental health champions in the company.
I see.
And mental health champions are people who are like that host family that took the boy. They're not fazed by helping children with mental health issues, and they want to help, and they are open to having training about it. They're not going to be doctors or anything, but they're happy to have awareness training as to how to best support students who are staying with them, or who they're taking care of, mm-hmm. that are struggling with mental health issues, and understand it. And it's amazing when you have training and you do have understanding of mental health issues, how it really helps.
Yeah. And that training involves what? What will it be that people learn? Just some sort of basics.
Well, Kate did very specific training for us. So first of all, we looked at the different types of mental health illnesses that people can have, mm-hmm. And then specifically looked at why international students might struggle specifically, and then specifically how to speak to them and cope with them if they're staying in your house. I mean, really, really, really excellent tailored training for us, and also for our Bright World buddies and our head office staff, how to approach the whole issues that we're being faced with schools, so that we're just very confident with schools that we know what we're doing.
Mm-hmm. So actually everybody involved with Bright World goes through this training, sounds like, for the most part, and will have this not only understanding of what a child might be, what might be manifesting for that child, in their behaviour or their mood or whatever that might be. And then it sounds like some really practical, like you say, ways of talking to them and ways of then addressing that with the school. That's incredible. It sounds like, a whole proper package in place.
Yeah. I mean, it's as simple as, one thing to learn is, if a child trusts you enough to disclose to you that they're feeling suicidal, for goodness sake, don't punish them by telling them they've got to leave school.
Yeah.
Or if they're self-harming, try to stop that happening and make it a shameful thing. Help them to deal with it safely. So it's just little things like this that are very big things, that you just understand things more, and telling schools right from the outset, firstly and foremostly, we're not a mental health crisis service. So let's just clear that up.
Yeah.
We're not medical professionals. So unless there is a medical professional involved telling us to do something, we're not doing anything. And that's protecting the school as well. Because when you speak to boarding schools at a high level, the DSL, they would never expect this of you, because they understand all of this. And they're really, boarding schools are really good. Unfortunately, not everyone that's there working on duty when these things happen do have that depth of training.
Yeah.
So an important role that us as guardians do is to, to be the knowledgeable ones in that situation on behalf of the school and stop this removal occurring willy-nilly without a medical professional deeming it to be a good idea.
So it's about destigmatizing it, taking that shame away from the child, stopping what can be seen as punitive measures against a child that's demonstrating these difficulties. And then, like you say, making sure that those boundaries are very clear. Like you say, you're not a crisis service or anything like that, but then putting a joint plan together to keep that child's safety paramount and that child's well-being, at the centre of it all.
What's really important throughout all of this is remembering to check with the child that they would like to go to a host family.
Yeah. Asking the child what they want.
Yeah, because usually if you say to a child, do you want to go to a host family for a few days, they will usually say, yes, please, I'd like that.
Okay.
Occasionally they will say, absolutely no way am I going. It's going to make this whole thing worse if you make me do that. So, but usually they will want to do it.
Okay.
But we have to ask the question, and that's part of the process that Kate has helped us think of all of these stages that we must go through before we then go ahead and move the child into a family.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, on a very basic level, we understand that not everybody has good experiences of family or a nice time with family or good relationships with their own family. And so they become, don't they, reticent, cautious, perhaps distrusting of family. It's too easy to assume, isn't it, all the time that family is good. For some people, family isn't necessarily good. And so, of course, asking for that permission from the child, asking about their thoughts and wishes is of course, paramount to the whole thing. And Lana, there's also something else. I think I must have seen it on your website. So you've mentioned, being very clear that there's no that you're not a crisis service. You're not there to rescue and make this okay for everybody. But am I right? There is an emergency process in place. I don't know if that's what you've just described. I'm conflating two things, or whether that's something separate for. For extreme circumstances. I don't know.
There's an emergency removal service, but it isn't always mental health issues we're dealing with.
I see. Okay.
The mental health removal, we call it removal because to us, the school's asking us to remove the student. And that's the terminology we use. That is a specific process that we follow with the guidance of Kate. She's helped us to work through that, and it's a flow chart.
I see.
Have they got any recent injuries through self-harm? Yes, no. If no, go to this. It's this, and we share that with the school. Openly, we'll share that with the school at the beginning of the process, or actually, we work with lots of schools throughout. Without even having had a mental health removal issue, we work with them in case we do, so they know how we would work.
I see.
We speak to their staff. They're the best relationships that we have, to be honest. So we're all on the same page.
And it is, isn't it? That's something that's really come through to me today. If I'm to step in your shoes for a second, if that's even possible. And it's that word relationships. I'm really conscious, Lana, of how many multiple relationships you are having to have doing the work you do. And I of course, as you've made clear the whole way through, the primary relationship is with the child for the most part, but actually you've got the parents paying and their wishes and their needs, and you've got the school and you've got staff around the child and you've got host families and you've got your own, of course, staff members as well in this. And I know that ultimately that creates that wraparound support for the child, and clear communication with everybody involved is key to so much of this. But I just can't imagine what that's like for you, having to keep all of these people in mind and just weigh up, everything, so that hopefully, there's a positive outcome at the end of it for that young person. I mean, hats off to you.
It's not my favourite part of the job, I have to say.
Yeah.
But, perhaps it's one that's most rewarding when it has a good outcome.
Yeah. How do you? I'm conscious of the time. I can't believe how quickly it's gone. What about when you step outside of your role, when you come away from work? Because I imagine it's all encompassing and it's probably far too long hours you work, I imagine. But those times you get your own downtime, how do you step away from all this? How do you look after yourself in that?
I have a very supportive business partner and husband, James, who gets all of my problems. We walk the dogs and we chew the cud, and he's very, very helpful to me in putting things in perspective. And the team as well, the team here at Bright World is so strong now. I've got really good people working here. And Sue Warren is our director of guardianships, and she takes a lot of the strain from us, and a problem shared and all that.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And I bet the dogs are good for that as well, aren't they?
Yes, as long as they get their treats, they seem to be quite happy.
They're often good listeners too, aren't they?
Yeah. But yeah, it when you've got an incident, a live incident on, and a student is struggling, you don't get downtime. Actually, really, you're on duty and you're worrying until they're okay.
Yeah, it's hard to completely detach, isn't it? I understand.
And mental health issues, emergency removals for drinking, vaping, whatever, never happen at 10 o'clock on a Tuesday morning.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure.
It's always 5-6 o'clock on a Friday evening. But you sort of realise that's just part of the job. That's our job.
And 25 years down the line then, Lana, to sort of bring us to a close, how does that feel? I mean, how on earth do you reflect back on that time, how far you've come? And do you look ahead? Is there anything in the offing in front of you? Does it just keep doing what you're doing?
Yeah, I enter the Euro Millions lottery every Tuesday in the hope that it will end one day.
Nothing yet, I assume.
Not even a number.
Oh.
I think I won £2.90 the other night. I don't feel... I think, as I say, because the team's grown with experience, we have people who've worked here for over 10 years. It does get easier for me and James because they're getting more knowledgeable and they're taking more of it from us. So another 10 years, I'll ask me then.
Thank you to Lana for joining us, and thank you for listening in. If you would like to know more about the work of Bright World, then all the information you'll need is provided in the show notes below. This podcast is brought to you by the National Counselling and Psychotherapy Society, a professional home for counsellors, psychotherapists, and over 120 wellbeing organisations across the UK. Autonomy, diversity, creativity and community are at the heart of what we do. We're creating a positive space for conversations with people who share common beliefs and goals, because together, our voice is louder. If you would like to know more about the NCPS, please visit www.ncps.com for more information. And please remember to follow and subscribe to this podcast so you're always part of the conversation.